The Polaris is obviously a really, really old concept. It's been around for a very, very long time. It was one of the more early ships that we did the exterior concept art for.
The Polaris came out in, I think, 2017. Lots of features have been added to the game since then that were not known about at that time or couldn't be planned for if they were known about.
Like a lot of the older ships, the interior just didn't fit. We couldn't get the size, the scale, or the metrics for how we would want it to appear to actually fit inside the frame that we had.
We've really now locked in how we want the interior layout, what the impact of the exterior means, but it's still the same Polaris that everyone originally saw and fell in love with. It just means that now it's kind of fit for purpose, whereas with the initial concepting phase and initial layout, it wasn't quite where we needed it to be.
The exterior remains pretty much the same, beyond it has got larger to accommodate some of the interior changes. The role is the same, the key visuals are the same. You may notice, again, some like panel line changes or turret updates. But fundamentally, you look at the Polaris now versus then, it's almost indistinguishable aside from that scale change, and the role remains identical to what it was before.
Moving on the inside, however, we have a completely different story. Although there wasn't much seen for what the inside was going to look like, we had to remove a lot of that and just start again. We fit the entirety of the interior inside of it while taking into account the change in component sizes,
where we went from size 0 all the way up to size 10, whereas now we've got much more kind of distinct categorization of our components.
We've now got a capital shield generator, capital power plant, capital cooler, all to support the actual size of the ship and the scale of it, especially for what its role is within the actual universe. So, talking layout, we don't have concept images for every single room within the ship, but I can give you an estimation of what you can expect from it. So, you start from the bridge, which has been opened up a bit to give you a bit more space and visibility. Behind that, we then have the escape pod section, where there's escape pods for all the crew to be able to quickly evacuate the ship. Moving behind that, we then have the captain's quarters and office, as well as the CO's office. Behind that again, we then have the armory. Moving further back, we have the crew bunk room and baths and showers. Across from that, we then have the rec area. So it's where the food is, it's where the relaxation is for the actual crew of the ship. Moving back further, we then come towards the center of the ship, where the actual hangar of the Polaris is. And that's had a bit of a size increase, so it's very comfortable to fit things like a saber in it now. On the left and right hand side, on one side you have the medical facilities. On the other you have the holding cells for any prisoners or wrongdoers that you might get hold of. And then moving back, you then have the entrance of where engineering is, which spans about 2 decks. A small section of it is at the rear, which houses some of the more standard components. Then the lower deck of engineering holds the large capital components for the Polaris. Moving back forward then from the rear, we then have the cargo hold. Moving forward from the cargo area, we then have the torpedo room, which has all of the torpedoes stored and an operations station if anyone needs to maintain any work down there.
So the Polaris is concept complete. We're pretty happy with the updates to it internally and hope you are as well. And now we are just at the point of scheduling when we can jump it into production. It's naturally a large ship, slightly larger than it was. So it's not going to be a quick endeavor, but we think it's going to be a pretty fruitful one by the end of it.
The lessons that we've learned over the years from the evolution of making ships and their interiors have all come into play when we've done the Polaris. And I can't wait for people to be able to see it.
So, what did we learn this week? Well, we learned a bit about the build system, how it can break, how it affects development, and how the new asset validation tool and the work of the tools teams themselves aim to combat that day in and day out. That the Polaris concept model internal layout rework is the last necessary step before that much beloved vehicle can move into production proper sometime in the future. And that if you want more information about the process of ship creation and everything that's involved, including a detailed breakdown of the newly revamped vehicle pipeline and a candid discussion of the where, when, and why of all things making spaceships, be sure you check out this year's IAE Special Edition Star Citizen Live up on YouTube. For Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee. We'll see you all here next week.